Welcome. Thank you for joining this horticulture session of the ABARES conference today. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land. We're meeting the Ngunnawal people. I acknowledge and respect their continuing culture and the contribution they make to the life of this region. I extend that recognition to the traditional custodians of other lands on which we are gathered today and to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples attending this nationwide event. Now, just some housekeeping before we get into our horticulture session for ABARES. You can submit and upvote the questions during presentations. So if you have any questions for our fantastic guests today, you can do that via the menu on the left. The live Q&A will be at the end of the session after all the presentations, or you'll be inviting during the panel discussion. We will endeavour to get to as many questions as possible, and if the speaker has given permission, their slides are available in the resources tab for you to download. The session will be recorded and available under the session catch-up tab after 24 hours. Now, I could say, keep an eye on the exits, the toilets down the hall, but you're probably all in your own homes and in your own offices, so I can leave that little bit of information out. So let's get to horticulture. There's no doubt that 2021 and the start of 2022 have been challenging. And the horticulture sector has had its share of bumps in the road, bottlenecks and blockages. The paddocks, in most cases, have been producing around Australia, and in some areas, we've had some of the best seasons in years. The problem during COVID has been getting that produce to customers, to consumers, and boy, has that required some agility, because consumers, as they always are, have been hungry and even more hungry for local. This session explores how producers, wholesalers, retailers have satisfied that hunger and how they've adapted to consumer changes and demands while also adapting to supply chain blips. And costs to consumers have risen in some areas. So are they prepared to absorb that cost in the price of their products to protect the profitability of our businesses, of our companies, of our farmers? So lots to discuss. I do want to add one really important thing. Due to the complexities of setting up a big conference like this, our guests pre-recorded their talks last week. And since then, Mother Nature has absolutely let loose. And we're in the middle of a whole lot of flooding, etc., that's going on at the moment, and it has affected a lot of people. So I think we'll be able to talk a little bit about that during our Q&A session at the end of this. But I'd like to introduce our first speaker today, Richard Gorman. He's the CEO of Kalfresh, a family business that has grown in leaps and bounds over the past few decades into a really sizable business. Welcome, Richard Gorman, to the ABARES conference.
Hi, I'm Richard Gorman. I'm the Managing Director of Kalfresh. We're a vertically integrated vegetable farming company based in Queensland. We grow and pack our vegetables in multiple areas, from Bowen in North Queensland down to southeast Queensland, where we grow in the Lockyer Valley, the Scenic Rim and the southern Darling Downs. We also have some leased properties in northern New South Wales. We're both conventional and organic farmers, currently produce over 4,000 acres of vegetable crop a year. Our main crops are carrots, beans, onions, sweet corn, pumpkin, and we also have snacking vegetables like mini capsicums and organic gourmet tomatoes. We process many variants of these vegetables into value-added products. Since 2016, we diversified into the value-added and organics part of the vegetable industry. That was about using more of our current crop. Over 3,000 tonnes of our vegetables get fed to the cattle every year, so it was about trying to make some more value out of some of those products, and then taking our lesser value products and seeing if we could do more with them. The organic side of things was our business partners in North Queensland were very close to organic on some of their production anyway. We thought we'd take advantage of that and test the market. Predominantly it's about adding value and looking after our environment. So our company's mission statement is to build a better farming community for our consumers and the environment. So that was a key part of our strategy. The challenges around COVID have been many and varied. So as farmers, we've always learnt to be adept and agile and making sure that we can change on the run. But with COVID, we had new challenges. There was a fundamental issue about making sure we were all safe and healthy. We had to protect our continuity of business. We're a big employer in a small area, so that was of a lot of concern to a lot of people. We faced significant delays in getting the supply of our seed, which is our genetics, packaging supplies, AdBlue for the trucks, you name it. There was supply shortages on anything. We have a radical increase in input costs. Fertiliser went up drastically very quickly, and cost of casual labour, the availability of casual labour, it was all extremely challenging. And we have people that work very hard in our business, but during COVID they've had to work extremely hard. It's taken a great toll on some people. They say necessity is the mother of all invention, so what COVID's taught us is we need to farm smarter. This is about keeping people out of the paddocks when it's hard and hot, because they're the jobs that people don't like doing. We've got to automate where possible, collect accurate data and get it back to the people that need to make decisions. We're very thankful for our diversified revenue streams. They've really stood us in good stead. So that was another key pillar of us learning to farm smarter. Automation at a field level is really easy to say, but very hard to do. We've developed a partnership with the Queensland Department of Agriculture. They've, during COVID, released a Smart Farm initiative, so we've partnered with them. It gives us access to people from universities as well as the department, and that's a focus on automating for better outcomes. That's reducing labour, reducing chemical, but also getting compaction out of our fields, lighter working equipment. Compaction is a real issue in the crop production, particularly in intensive horticulture, which is what we are. So when it comes to automation and looking to the future, this is our first step. We're also making rapid improvements in our current farming system for the crops that we grow and pack today. Zero or low tillage is what you do before you plant your crop or while you plant your crop. That's again pulling passes out of your cropping system to lower the compaction on the soil. That's really important for healthy soil. Beneficial insects within the crop, beneficial microbes that we use through our fertigation system. That's a big part of our farming system now. That's just taking chemicals out of our cropping system. Cover cropping, so between the cash crops, your vegetable crops, we put in a regenerative multi-species cover crop. It's different types of leaves, different types of plant matter, but more importantly, it's all different type of roots. There's as much happens below the ground as above the ground, and that's really important for a sustainable farming system. Automated pivot irrigation is a strategy that our company has chosen to deploy. That again is about taking compaction out of the field, getting the water on, but also delivering everything that crop needs in a different way, and that is through the water. In the future, there's also the opportunity to put data monitoring systems on and use the centre pivot like a big radar. We've also learnt to think like our consumers. We've learnt that the trend is your friend, and the trend is to better foods packaged and sold in a more convenient way. There's a good opportunity. Some of our vegetables don't meet the normal specifications for every pack, so being able to value add those and still get them into the consumer's hands is a good opportunity. And again, this just further diversifies our revenue streams. Understanding that we were going to have to move further into the processing of our vegetables to supply them in a convenient way for our consumers, not just now but well into the future. We also partnered with the Queensland Government's Coordinator General's team to develop an agricultural precinct. This is a hub that allows us to all get together and bring a lot of those products into a central place to make that production more efficient, and it also help us collaborate with people that we already work with today, but new industries that are going to be born from this sustainable push in the future. Cornerstone to our precinct is what's called an anaerobic digester, and the goals for that is we want to supply the power to run our facilities in a renewable and sustainable way. The more commercial outcome is it provides us with a very readily available low-cost organic fertiliser that we already have a lot of experience with and is able to be delivered by our centre pivot irrigation system. In closing, what COVID has taught us is it's not all about cost. It's really recentered our focus on, well, what is really important. It's important for us to have a sustainable, reliable, safe food supply. It's important for us to have secure employment in not just our region, but all regions. Australians demand ethically grown food. We understand that. We now need to work out, well, how are we going to do that and mitigate the competition from imports where those countries don't have those same ethical standards, and maintain that stable and secure food supply. At the same time, we do have to provide affordable food for everyone in this country. So that's still something that we have to do, but all of these things are achievable. Thank you for listening to our story.
Thank you there, Richard Gorman. Fascinating chat and so many different things that are going on in your business and so many different things that you're committed to there, including organics, etc. And now, as we mentioned, you've got farming interests in Queensland and New South Wales. And over that past 6 years, Kalfresh has moved into certified organic production in North Queensland and the Scenic Rim, and now is a large supplier of organic fresh produce to retailers. The company's also looking at organic fertiliser and green power from veggie waste. So there's a whole lot of things going up there. And as I mentioned before, these chats were recorded last week. So we're not, at this point, haven't been talking about floods and all sorts of things that Mother Nature has thrown at us, but we might get the opportunity to do that after the last speaker when we have our Q&A panel. So keep those questions, that in mind for questions. Now, coming up, we have Shane Schnitzler from Fresh Markets Australia. Now, I know I had a chat to Shane just before, and he's just about ready for a nap because Shane works from about 11 p.m. or midnight each night. He's committed to those wholesale veggie markets and is a key player in those organisations nationally. He's also a key player in the Melbourne wholesale markets. So without further ado, Shane Schnitzler from Fresh Markets Australia, welcome to ABARES.
Fresh fruit and vegetable wholesale markets are located around the world and offer a structured trading environment where all parts of supply chain can meet and collectively trade. In Australia, the fresh produce wholesale markets, referred to as central markets, are located in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Perth, Adelaide and Newcastle. Fresh Markets Australia is the national industry body representing wholesalers and supporting businesses in those central markets through a network of state industry bodies. It is estimated that more than 90% of Australia's commercial fruit and vegetable growing establishments do business with the central market wholesaler, and more than 50% of the fresh fruit and vegetables consumed in Australia is handled by a market wholesaler. The customer supply chain of a central market wholesaler can include independent supermarkets, greengrocers, major supermarkets, processors, exporters, providors, the food service sector being food and beverage sector, including airlines, cruise ships and major event facilities, and the institutional food service sector, as well as weekend markets. The economic contribution of our central markets directly and indirectly is significant. On their own, our 6 central markets turn over in excess of $7 billion a year at wholesale prices. Over 4 billion kilograms of fresh fruit and veggies move through the markets in any one year. The central markets are significant employment hubs, with more than 20,000 people employed directly or working on site to buy fresh produce every day. In addition to that, across Australia, more than 2,700 independent fruit and vegetable retailers and 18,700 food service businesses, directly or indirectly, rely on our central markets for their fresh fruit and vegetable needs. These sectors employ 18,000 and 140,000 staff respectively, with a turnover of $3.7 billion and $17.3 billion annually. Just like the years before the pandemic started, the horticultural industry experienced supply of some fruit and vegetables being impacted by droughts, floods, cyclones and bushfires, while other produce groups experienced good and even oversupply. They have seen the impacts on demand caused by the GFC. High interest rates, low interest rates, superfoods, whole foods, big events and the popularity of cooking shows. The pandemic was yet another disruptor. As the pace of the pandemic changed, consumer habits to cook at home, coupled with the effects on the economy across the country, the sentiment of supply chain, customers alike, shifting sands with the demand for fresh produce, fluctuating as dictated by the price expectations of our customers. There were some positives though for the supply chain. Wholesalers and growers' good working relationships, some decades long, continued with the good flow of information in relation to the changing of demand and supply. The diversity of central markets supply chain customers means that produce can be marketed widely and not exclusively to one sector. Some wholesalers reported reduced or halted supply of produce due to growers' labour shortages, resulting in crops not being able to be harvested. The Australian consumer's initial response to the pandemic has been well documented. The independent retail sector experienced a very high level of demand across all produce, particularly hard produce. The pandemic has provided a win for independent retailers. There haven't been the same challenges for the independents as the majors, as they mainly get their produce out of one central market system, and the central market did not have supply issues. Given the number of growers supplying wholesalers in the central markets, retailers have a large pool of produce to choose from. Any shortages that one wholesaler is experiencing can usually be covered by another wholesaler. More than 1,500 independent businesses operate out of the central market. This is the not putting all your eggs in one basket approach. The independents have a distribution model which is not reliant on one particular system or one group of employees. The risk of their supply chain being disrupted is reduced significantly as they come into the central market. They buy the produce, they put it on their own trucks and they take it to their own stores. If their workers have not been able to go to work, store owners, their family and sometimes their friends are working around the clock because they do not want to let their customers down. That's why the independents have been able to keep their shelves full. Encouraging and supporting independent retail sectors is crucial to the wholesalers. The central markets have established a consumer-facing program called A Better Choice, designed to educate consumers about the quality, service and freshness of produce at their local fruit and vegetable shop. The program supports independent business owners across Australia and presents an opportunity for consumers to come together to help create a positive future for business owners, produce wholesalers and local growers who supply them. On the other hand, the abrupt and almost complete closure of the food and beverage sector had a dramatic and negative impact on the demand for the sector-specific produce, such as avocados, lemons and limes, resulting in an oversupply of those products. While a number of wholesalers were able to pivot to the consumer market through supplying to independent retailers and supermarkets, there was an overall negative impact on wholesalers as the produce destined for the food and beverage sector, increase the supply to other supply chain customers. These wholesalers needed to quickly reorganise the way they did business, reducing staff and overheads to allow them to stay in business. Wholesalers have learned from the heavily reliance on supplying sector-specific produce. They paid attention to the transparency of their business activities and the clarity of just what the food and beverage sector meant to their business. As the food and beverage sector are now open for business without restrictions, a number will never return and others will take their place. The overall strength of the economy and consumer readiness to re-engage will dictate consumer demand for those services and therefore the produce required by that sector. There may be a longer term impact for those wholesalers relying heavily on this sector. Those who have realigned their business model will have a greater chance to rebound and be viable in the long term. Exporters in our central market supply chain have experienced negative impacts due to the availability and increased cost of air and sea freight and the contraction of overseas markets. Some exporters quickly pivoted to offer other services, such as third-party logistics. This sector will likely see some recovery with the international flights recommencing, hopefully delivering a reduction in the price of air freight and a rebound in the business profitability. Looking after the community is important to the wholesalers and the central market supply chain. Their involvement with charity and food relief activities has continued throughout the pandemic, and over the past 2 years, well over $2 million has been raised and given to charities, hospitals and victims of natural disasters, to name a few. These include activities and charity auctions such as the first box of cherries or tray of mangoes for the season, bushfire appeals. The need for virtual rather than in-person auctions did not dampen the generosity of our market community. The independent retailers have also continued with their community activities, supporting local sporting clubs, athletics and the arts. Many wholesalers have experienced staff shortages and at some point not being able to open their doors. True collaboration has kicked in with their neighbouring wholesalers, their competitors working with them to sell growers' produce on their behalf. While there is no sure way to overcome fluctuating supply and demand, and there is no formula, no magic processes, it is one thing: resilience. They know how to adapt to environmental and economic challenges. They manage risk every day and have done for decades. Pandemic or no pandemic.
Thank you, Shane Schnitzler from Fresh Markets Australia. You can see there Shane is very committed to the fruit and vegetable industry and been involved in the independent sector for quite a while, and that wholesale sector, and just amazing to hear about all that agility. And also, you know, as you said, some of those figures that you mentioned, turnover of 7 billion, moved 1 billion kilos of fresh fruit and veggies. You know, that's incredible figures that you mentioned there. And we'll all get a chance to have a further chat with Shane Schnitzler after this session finishes, or towards the end of this session. But before that, we are going to hear from Tim Nitschke, brand category manager for vegetables at Coles. Now, Tim has led that vegetables team since 2019 and has worked across supply chains and buying during his 13 years with Coles. He understands the supermarket business right throughout the store and through the supply chain. So it's a really good contrast from to Shane Schnitzler. We heard a lot about the independent sector. Now we're going to hear about some of the big supermarkets. So time now to cross to Tim Schnitzke, and welcome to ABARES.
Hello, thank you for having me here today. My name is Tim Nitschke and I head up the vegetables team at Coles Supermarkets. Now I'd like to start by acknowledging the Wurundjeri people, the traditional custodians of the land from which I present today. And I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. And I'd like to extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that are watching this session today. I'd also like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the team members at Coles who for the last 2 years have worked incredibly hard in stores, distribution centres and within our own office roles. They've helped us feed the country at a time where people relied on their local supermarket more than ever before. Now, our fresh produce team at Coles are incredibly passionate produce people, and in fact our central buying and quality team average nearly 15 years in role. And John from Queensland is our longest serving team member. He recently celebrated 47 years of service. But I'd also like to acknowledge our amazing growers. Without them we couldn't do what we do each and every day. We have some incredible relationships which span many years, but a great example would be Carter and Spencer, who just last month celebrated their 50-year milestone for supplying Coles. So well done to Craig and his team. Now today I'm going to talk to you about the size and the scale of the Coles fresh produce supply chain. I'm going to share some examples of where Coles and our growers had to do things differently through COVID. I'll touch on what our customers are thinking at the moment, and finally talk to you about the value of partnership and collaboration. Now, as you would expect, the Coles fresh produce business is a significant operation. Product is moving 24 hours a day, 365 days per year. We have hundreds of growers and suppliers operating from over 1,500 sites, delivering into 7 distribution centres across the country, which then send out 750,000 tonnes of produce per year to 835 stores, who serve 350 million produce customers. Now, almost every Coles store across the country receives a daily produce delivery, and our bigger stores actually receive 2 per day. And our truck drivers put in some pretty big trips to feed the far corners of the country. The biggest is from our Perth DC to our Kununurra store, spanning 3,047 kilometres and taking 33 hours of driving time. Now, our team are passionate about freshness, and we partner with the best growers in Australia to help us move product as quickly as we can from our farms to our customers. Growers like Fresh Select in Werribee South will harvest their iceberg lettuce and in as few as 20 minutes have them into the vacuum cooler to get down to temp, all to maximise the life of the product for our customers at the other end. They'll deliver today's lettuce into our DC tonight, where our teams will work hard to turn it around and send it to store tomorrow. The challenges of COVID brought about an unprecedented level of disruption to our supply chain, and the way industry has come together to feed people all over Australia has been nothing short of amazing. The resilience of our growers to find creative solutions to these challenges of the pandemic has been impressive, and I want to share 3 quick stories that highlight this. Now, this is Ross, Chris and Josh Peroni from Peroni Brothers Produce in Ayr, far north Queensland. And like many growers, the impact of closed borders was a real challenge for them. And I'm sure there was more than one occasion that they thought their zucchini and eggplant season may have been at risk. Now, the brothers went about building an on-site quarantine facility, the first in the region, to help them welcome Pacific Island workers to their farm and keep their season alive. And in doing so, they grew their business with Coles and earned our admiration for their dedication to our customers. Another example, this time within our supply chain, would be the standing up of a new distribution centre overnight in Victoria. In June 2020, the Coles Laverton DC was starting to be impacted by growing caseloads and isolation. Now, we made the decision to stand up a new produce DC in Somerton, and our growers rerouted trucks and worked with us to support this, with the only focus on everyone's mind to keep stock flowing to our Victorian customers, who were more reliant on their supermarkets than ever before as the state locked down. And finally, the industry went to work on supporting those that needed it the most. Now, we have a great ongoing relationship with Second Bite, and over this time we worked with our growers to send even more produce from our DCs to them. Now, Second Bite were working hard to support food security in places they have never had to before, particular regional communities recently impacted by the bushfires. But another region that was impacted was Shepparton, which is a key growing region for us at Coles, and we have many strong relationships in that area. So when Shepparton saw an influx of cases and a large portion of the town forced into isolation, we felt compelled to respond, and we sent truckloads of food and groceries into the town to ensure people could isolate without the fear of not having food. The efforts of growers and retailers working together all over the country to support their local communities has been one positive in a very challenging few years. So as we move into the next phase of the COVID-19 pandemic, it is important to understand what delivering for Australian consumers means. Now, the 3 core fundamentals that our customers always expect of us are quality, availability and value. And when they're not in line with their expectations, we can see the impact that it has. Now, one example would be availability, which has been thrust into the spotlight more recently given the pressure on supply chains. We've all seen the customer response when they begin to worry about the supply of key household items and staples. But there are also emerging trends: omni-channel shopping, how it has grown, and sustainability. And when we speak of omni-channel, we're really talking about the significant adoption of online shopping. Now, with this increased adoption comes additional challenges and higher expectations. Now, poor availability is amplified even further in the eyes of a highly planned online customer. They want to have the confidence that they'll get what they order. And online shoppers have bigger baskets and shop less often. So this means they expect their produce to last longer in the fridge at home. But finally, they want to trust that the quality of their fresh foods is going to meet their expectations as if they picked it themselves. Now, our customers are also increasingly thinking about how their product is grown and also sustainability. Ethical labour, animal welfare, packaging and environmental impacts are all factors that more and more customers would swap products, brands or supermarkets over. Now, while growers around the country are owed a quiet and straightforward 2022, there is little doubt that further challenges will again test the resolve of growers around the country. The need to create value through partnership and collaboration has never been greater, and this is why we are proud to partner with growers around the country, collaborating to solve customer and supply problems and helping to build strong, sustainable businesses. Let me take you through a couple of examples of this. Now, I'd like to introduce you to the Raffa family, and they are about to trial polytunnel protection over some of their Victorian asparagus crop. Now, using that microclimate, they'll broaden the shoulders of their asparagus season. The Raffa family share our ambition for reducing imports, and through our collaboration, we are solving a customer problem whilst removing the cost of importing. Now, that's value created and shared between customer, grower and retailer. I'm proud that Coles awarded the Raffa family a Nurture Fund grant of $250,000 last year to trial this new approach and further reinforce our Australian first sourcing commitment. Another recent example of Coles collaborating with our growers helped us implement a faster transport solution to Darwin. Now, I spoke earlier about our passion for freshness and maximising life for our customers, but we also identified that security of transport for our growers coming out of Darwin was a challenge. Now, by collaborating with them, we were able to implement a road train solution from Adelaide to Darwin, which has taken one day off the time it takes our produce to get there, giving it back to our customers, as well as providing the much needed surety of an economical transport solution for our NT growers. A real triple win for our customers, the grower, and us as a retailer. Now, finally, Coles are proud of our relationship with Sundrop Farms, who turns saltwater and sunshine into amazing quality trust tomatoes in the arid desert setting of Port Augusta. Now, Sundrop signified the ultimate collaboration with Coles through a historic 10-year supply agreement entered into on the basis of solving a perennial supply challenge with investment made possible from the backing of Coles. Now, Sundrop's passion for sustainability extends well beyond its water and energy credentials, and they've recently worked with us to implement a new box design which reduces cardboard usage by over 200,000 kilograms per year and creates significant cost savings. Now, looking forward, I'm left in no doubt that customer-centric collaboration between retailer and grower is critical to navigating the years ahead, then supporting the innovation and the investment that creates value within the supply chain and fuels our future growth. Now, we understand the needs of our customers and the challenges of our growers, and our team work hard each and every day to deliver on our purpose of sustainably feeding all Australians to help them lead healthier, happier lives. And we look forward to continuing to partner with Australia's best growers to do this. Thank you.
Now, I believe it's time to start thinking about questions and what you would like to ask our fantastic guests here today. So just a reminder about who we have heard from. Just then you heard from Tim Nitschke from Coles. We also had Fresh Markets Australia's Shane Schnitzler, who had some great information and a good insight in how the independent sector is working. And we also heard from Richard Gorman, who is with Kalfresh, which is a fantastic family-owned and run company that has just gone from strength to strength over the past decades. Now, we have some obvious questions that we want to ask, and I can see some that are coming up here on the question list. But first off, welcome everybody. Welcome to the panel. And I think you can all hear me and you're all ready to have a chat. I want to start by asking Shane Schnitzler, and you'll have to get off mute when you speak, Shane. But we talked about before, you did these presentations before the floods. So Mother Nature's thrown another red herring at us all. How is this sort of fitting in with what you do? Because I know you work at night, you ensure that all this product comes into the central places around Australia and it gets out to everybody. So just because this has been a big change, is this sort of affecting you and how?
Okay, so thanks, Fiona. The role that I play, first of all, is I've got my own business in the central markets in Melbourne, and I'm the chairman of Fresh Markets Australia, and I've been holding that role since 2010. So the floods and how it's affected us, we all try and work together, and we're in touch with each other every single day, and we network all of our wholesalers across the country as well. And devastating in Rockley in Brisbane on Saturday night, Sunday morning, when that market went 2.5 metres underwater. And sadly, for the second time in 11 years, not quite as devastating as the time before, but its stock losses are huge. So there were some real challenges for the team in Rockley and all of those businesses. Some did it better than others. There's no doubt about it. There was a lot of stock that was moved down the coast, and after the floods, there was a hell of a lot of stock moved up the coast, both from Sydney and Melbourne and Adelaide, to come across and feed some of the people that will get some product to some of the people. So it's been challenging, and hopefully things are going okay in Sydney as we speak, because I know they're copping a fair battering today. Although there's another 2 inches being dropped on Rockley, I think, as we speak as well. So very challenging.
Is there any idea of stock losses at Rockley?
We haven't got a total, but we know that it's large. I'll probably leave it at that because it is seriously large. And there's a lot of stuff to work through there about those stock losses and how that all sort of comes together in those businesses. And, you know, some of those people just didn't get the time to get the product out, or maybe there wasn't enough trucks to get it out because the warning signals weren't as strong this time as what they were in 2011, from what I understand. But as I say, I'm the chairman of Fresh Markets Australia, not the CEO of the Rockley markets. So we're there to support and support that team and their customers.
Well, just to stick with you for 1 minute, because just reflecting back on the 2 years that we've had, you said you had no trouble with supply, but then, of course, demand got affected with all the restaurants, et cetera, closing down. So has it sort of calibrated?
Well, the supply through the pandemic was an interesting one for us because whilst I understand the major supermarkets had supply issues on their shelves, we didn't have those issues independently for a lot of reasons. One, because so many growers supply in the central markets, but there's so many different wholesalers selling similar products that we're able to pull together. And I think, the logistics of supply chain is somewhat simplified into the independents compared to bigger operations. So, the independents come and pick up their own stock and transport it themselves and put it on the shelf. So, their ability to be able to have in-stock position was a lot easier than others. So they managed to get through that pretty well. And in actual fact, I think the independents have actually come through the pandemic a bit stronger maybe than what they went in.
Okay, thank you for that. And just quickly to Richard, you're, I believe, actually on holidays on the Gold Coast, so probably can't even get back home at the moment. But how are things going back at Kalbar?
Yeah, look, the not being able to get home, but then been told to stay here for another couple of days has been a bit interesting. Lots of phone calls. Our business in general hasn't suffered any major infrastructure loss, but a lot of suppliers like us have. So that infrastructure loss is topsoil, pumps, equipment, factories being flooded. So we're one of the fortunate but few. So we actually are bringing stock from the central markets back out to our farm cool stores and trading the market floor stock for other farmers out of our cool store at the moment, which wasn't something that had happened last week after we'd done our presentations. In general, it's a wait and see. Like Shane said, there's another weather event passing over us now. So what survived the initial major weather event is compromised. So a lot of crop in the ground that's young, it's ready to be picked. So it's very, very challenging and quite stressful. These are periods of high stress.
So some of those would be lost, but you're probably yet to realise.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Lots of lost crop. Within our own business, it's probably, like I said, not as bad as some, but it's at the moment for us, it's in the hundreds of thousands over the next few weeks, not the millions. But another weather event, and it does turn quite sharply. You've got plants that are struggling already.
Well, that topsoil loss, that had already been happening, hadn't it? So this adds to that.
Yeah, these different areas have had different effects. So once the water flow gets up out of the main tributaries and makes its way across the land, if you're one of those people that are affected, like we were in 2011 and 2013, it takes a couple of years to recover from that. Lots of earthworks, and so quite challenging.
Okay, now we cross over to Tim Nitschke with Coles. Tim, just to stick on this flood thing just for a moment, and then we'll go to more of the questions that are coming. Obviously, Coles has lots of stores around the place. No doubt you're affected in different places. Can you give us any insights?
Yeah, so there's no doubt that the current situation is both devastating and challenging. And as the guys have said, it's come on the back of previous events not that long ago. I think as a retailer, our first consideration is definitely to make sure that our team are safe and they're all well, and then we're very much into the detail of, okay, can the stores trade? Are they any repairs required? How do we replenish the stores, and how do we reopen? Because obviously those local communities are heavily reliant on the supermarket. They need to get in there to get their essential goods that they need, and so the team here are very focused on getting that food and getting those groceries into stores as quickly as possible to recover as quickly as possible.
So some of those stores have had to close?
Yeah, we've seen some stores close on the back of obviously there's been big impacts in towns like Lismore and the like, but also road closures and team members being able to get to the store. And so obviously safety first for our team, and then we focus on how we can service the community to the best of our ability.
Costly as well.
Pardon?
Costly as well, no doubt.
Yeah, I think the first focus is always about making sure that we can meet that customer need. I think that's it hasn't gone anywhere over the course of the pandemic, and it won't through floods and bushfires and all of the other challenges that come with it. We have a dedicated team here that meet every day to address all of those challenges and make sure that we have what we need in place to service our customers, and then we work out the rest from there.
Okay, I'm just going to cross to Richard. Here's one, because I did hear you in some of our previous chat talk about relationships and, just how important they are between suppliers, between businesses, etc. How can policy settings be improved to help promote cooperation between value chain participants and build those relationships? How can we sort of encourage that?
As far as policy settings go, if you could, I think, getting some comprehension around how the food supply chain works, so that there's not an hour of the day that people don't work. So I know Shane starts at 11 o'clock at night. We had harvesters driving till 2 this morning, or however when it got wet. Tim, we delivered to Tim's DCs from anywhere from 2 to 7 in the morning. Like it's not 9 to 5 work. Never has, never will be. So when we talk about policy settings and we talk about wages and people's roles, like acknowledging that the food supply chain is really important, and you've got to understand it. It's not just a broad brush approach when we work on things when it comes down to wages is one that has been of difficult for producers, and the people that do that work, we need to respect them and understand how they do it, and make sure that we develop systems that don't take too much money out of the pockets of people who are working casually to help get the crops picked. And when I mean, they need small, lower flat tax rates. So the week it's really busy, they don't see half their money disappear. So just getting an acknowledgement of what it takes to get all these things onto the shelves. We're more costly than our overseas competitors. Not at crop level. Like, by the time it gets to harvesting, we're usually one of the cheapest in the world and the highest quality. But everything that happens from then, we have different food safety expectations, different quality expectations, different ethics around how we do it. As a country, we've just got to acknowledge that that's just an added cost, and we've got to work out how to deal with it.
Richard Gorman, I think that's also something about getting that message across to consumers. Shane Schnitzler, do you think that consumers are sort of understanding that to get fresh, to get local, costs may have to rise, they possibly have risen and might need to stay that way? Is that something we need to get the message out on?
Yeah, well, look, I think there's no correlation between quality and cost, but yeah, it's a difficult message to get out to consumers about an extra cost or a product's going up. Supply and demand is what drives our industry, as both Richard and Tim would agree, I'm sure. If they start running out of stock, the price goes up, and it's a difficult one to get the consumers to understand that. I think first and foremost, having the product on the shelf all the time is the most important thing we can do at the best quality. And then, in terms of the price, at the end of the day, it's got to be a reasonable return back to the grower, because it's sustainable farming. At the end of the day, the farmers have got to earn a living, and that's fair, and that's a very fair call. So does the whole supply chain. So that's, I guess, where it all starts for us.
Tim Nitschke, one of the questions, what is the role of price transparency along supply chains to help build understanding of value-added activities and also contribute to due diligence in commercial relationships?
Yes, I think from a Coles point of view, our direct growers have the ultimate in price transparency. They obviously know what we pay them directly. They can walk into any of our stores and they can see our price on shelf, and obviously we're a publicly listed company, and so I think our direct growers have that, have real price transparency with a company like Coles. I appreciate that that's probably not the same across all routes to market, and so I can't obviously speak for any of those, but definitely I think very transparent within our business.
Okay, and in terms of what is next? I mean, we've talked about a whole lot of bottlenecks, etc., that have been occurring during this pandemic, and obviously Shane and Richard, you would have found that getting produce out to markets have we got there? Have we sort of improved that, and are we on the road to recovery apart from the flooding situation at the moment? Shane Schnitzler.
From my perspective, the answer is yes. Pre the floods, we had a couple of other issues in between the pandemic, like the train issue in the centre of Australia, going back to about Australia Day this year, which held up a lot of produce sitting on a train for a long time, and that certainly created some drama, certainly with products like avocados. So that was something that sort of added to our supply chain issues with the pandemic. But I think most of them are flattened out now. I think it's a reasonably good supply up until this week.
Are you actually worried about things like, the so-called shortage in truck drivers? Does that sort of come into your thinking?
Yeah, well, I mean, we kind of play a little bit in that space, and it was interesting. So I referred to the train issue, and all of a sudden we had to find trucks to put that on, because the packers and the growers have been using trains for a long, long time, and then all of a sudden had to reach out to trucks. So it really comes down to then, if you can get the trucks, it's how much you're prepared to pay to get the trucks, and that's where we end up with a more expensive product when it gets to consumers. But that's the length that people go to make sure that everyone gets product on shelf over in the East Coast. And I'm sure, Tim does veggies, I think, but I'm sure the fruit buyer would be right across that. And the price of product went up substantially just through that period until the trains got back on deck. So, yeah, and he's right about transparency. I mean, that's just part of that.
Yeah, I think it's incredible, some of those issues, some of the agility that you needed to get through that. Tim Nitschke, did you have to change, or did your relationships, or have your relationships with various suppliers change due to labour shortages as well? That's another issue we've hardly touched on.
I think our relationship with our growers have evolved in a positive way over many years, and not just the last two. It's easy to probably forget that, the 2 years before the pandemic were two of the most challenging from a drought point of view as well. And so that increase in communication and collaboration that's happened over a number of years has certainly held us in good stead. And I think where the grower and retailer relationship has really thrived has been on the back of that fantastic communication, very open and transparent, and we kind of know where we're going. But it's also enabled us to have the conversation where we can sort of help each other out as well. I'll use Shane's example about the avocados. We obviously run a significant road fleet with our 800 shops and DCs around the country. And in that instance, we obviously have trucks going to WA each and every day, and we're able to backhaul avocados for growers back from WA to get them over here to Victoria, not just for us, but right across the market. That meant that those growers could move their fruit and able to support them in that moment of need, which was great to be able to do.
Tim Nitschke from Coles, are you finding that there is more demand for local compared to the imported products that you may bring in?
Yeah, I spoke about in my piece around how it has grown. It's definitely something that people are focused on, and we have an Australian first sourcing commitment at Coles, and well over 96% of our fresh produce does come from Australia. And only in the last 12 months or so, we've been able to move a product such as garlic now to 100% Australian grown, which is fantastic to keep moving more and more products over. There's definitely a focus on local, and it's top of mind for customers. There's no doubt.
Richard Gorman, I just wanted to ask, and we've heard a fair bit about how probably before floods we were having pretty good seasons in agriculture, certainly in some areas. I believe so in your area as well. Was that the case, and did that mean you had an abundant supply?
Yes, we did have a pretty good growing season coming up to the floods, and there was good supply around. A lot of the supply was being carefully monitored based on available resources, equipment, staff, people like that. I'd like to just go back and touch on with Tim. So when we were planning what to do over the next couple of years, I am a direct supplier to Tim, and along with all the central markets and other retailers, the communication around what we're doing and what we're planning next has been more strategic in the last few years. So we are getting stronger, tighter relationships, a lot more transparency, a lot more trust. And then with the central markets, when we do get periods of abundant supply, we push more onto the central markets and offer better price and different things like that. But I guess I just did want to drop back to the relationships for a second. We're not sitting here concerned about the transparency within our direct dealings with retailers. That's definitely improved. And then I think over time, with the changes in the way people buy produce, the relationships around the central markets will change as well. But yes, I guess getting back to this actual question, yes, we were having a pretty good season, as were a lot of different people. But when you're having something good go on, you're always looking around the corner for what's about to happen, because that's farming works.
Can you actually get home at the moment? Can you get back to your farming area?
Yes, I can.
So that will be happening soon, no doubt.
Yeah.
Shane, Schnitzler. How does that go when you've got that different supplies happening? If suddenly, Richard Gorman is saying, I have all this produce, is it just a constantly moving feast for you?
Absolutely, and I think it
Across
shows
Australia. Yeah,
I think it shows you the resilience of the central markets, where they can go from a short supply to an oversupply, and be able to move the volume that the growers are asking them to move. So, as I said before, the central markets works on supply and demand. That's where most people get their base pricing mechanism from. We're now under the watchful eye of a horticultural code of conduct as well. So there's a stack of transparency involved in the transactions compared to what there may have been previously. The tonnage that you heard me talk about on the video is an incredible number.
Yeah, can you just remind me, I don't know if you have them on the tip of your tongue, but some of the movement, the kilos there was huge.
Lots. Billions.
It was. It must have been a huge lesson in agility when you had that whole food and beverage sector collapse pretty much overnight.
Yeah, and look, I can talk about that personally in my personal experience. I've got an avocado business, and so that sector of cafes and pubs and clubs and restaurants and events and arts probably represented some 50 or 60% of what I did. And sadly, when that was closed and Melbourne suffered more than any other city in the world, we really had to learn another way of doing business to be able to continue to move that product for our growers. And our independent sector, hats off to them. They moved really quickly. Fruit boxes delivered to home helped that style. That was huge. It was just incredible that we actually got through that. There was a period where we stopped for a while and we had to think about what we were doing collectively, but there's a lot of people out there with a lot of ideas about how to go about things and get the job done. I think the independent sector did a really good job to help move that volume throughout that period. There's no doubt that we probably, in the pandemic, collectively, we probably didn't move exactly what probably needed to be moved, but the harvest certainly slowed down, the workforce slowed down due to COVID restrictions and what have you as well. But yeah, very challenging time, and I think hats off to everybody in the whole supply chain, actually.
And do you think coping with such an unimagined event must help you when things like these floods, etc., affecting Queensland, New South Wales, come and throw another spanner in the works?
Yeah, I think COVID it's a bit different because it's certainly when it changes people's shopping habits completely, and not only just their shopping habits, but then their mental attitude about how they live and what they do, because that's what it did. People all of a sudden took up cooking and doing things that they'd never done before, which is why now everyone wants to eat out because no one wants to go and do that anymore. But interestingly, it was just an incredible thing to see. And the floods is just completely different. It comes and it leaves a lot of damage, a lot of destruction. And for what it's worth, I think the 2011 floods cost Rockley markets in excess of 25 million. It's a big number. So I'm not sure what this one's going to cost the guys up there, but it's a lot of money. And they've got to get back from that. So support from the growers Australia-wide is what we're looking for.
Just a quick question without notice. Was there anything in particular that demand shot through the roof, like avocados, for example, or bananas during COVID? Was there anything that surprised you?
For me, as an observer, potatoes, pumpkin, hard produce went crazy. Christmas times two for the first lockdown. That's what we saw.
Direct to consumer. Do you think it was consumers actually going and buying their groceries at independent supermarkets, etc., that were driving that?
Yeah, I think the habits seem to be pretty similar across, whether they're shopping at a major or they're shopping at an independent. But I think the habits seem to be pretty similar. But we saw hard produce demand just go nuts and veggies go nuts for that very first pandemic. Things changed in Melbourne as it went on. So when we got to lockdown 2, 3, 4, 5, things sort of changed a little bit. It wasn't like the first one. The first one was very much a panic buy. Stock up, so your hard produce, I think. garlic, onions, potatoes, pasta, rice, what would be happening if you were in the Ukraine, I guess, but in a different way. So that's what we saw, and then as the pandemic sort of went on, things sort of leveled out a little bit. We saw them shopping the whole range a little bit differently. I know maybe Tim could answer some of that.
Yeah, Tim Nitschke from Coles. What are your observations during that pandemic?
Oh, we spoke at length right through the pandemic about the rise of the home chef. People cooking from scratch certainly went through the roof. We saw ginger, chilies, garlic, herbs, leeks, onions, all of those things add flavour to recipes. We saw celebrity chefs doing live Instagram, cook with me kind of sessions, and we saw people trying to do things that they probably wouldn't have the time or the energy to try any other time. So there was lots of experimentation from customers, and I think that that certainly petered out over a little while. But there's no doubt people are certainly eating more at home since the pandemic started.
Okay. All right. Well, look, that looks like we come to the end of our horticulture session here at the ABARES conference. I hope that we've managed to cover all your questions. I just want to say thank you to Tim Nitschke from Coles, Fresh Markets Australia's Shane Schnitzler, and Richard Gorman from Kalfresh. Thanks so much for giving your time and giving us those fantastic perspectives on what happened during COVID, how you're sort of approaching the floods, etc., but also some of those relationships and insights into how they're being built, etc. Thanks so much for joining us at ABARES.
Thanks, Fiona.